Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. Ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy Tuesday morning, September 19th, to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. Drew Hicken is on the other side of the glass during today's proceedings, touching the buttons, sliding the sliders, making everything work. Drew, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. It's a strange morning in that it was strange to actually talk to Jimbo Fisher yesterday, and you'll hear about that press conference a little bit later. We're going to play a little game of Duly Quoted. But until then, it's just kind of fascinating to me how we're, I guess you could say, in this season, but at the same time, there's just not a ton to talk about because we've touched on a lot of it. And until we see it in action, until we play it again, it's hard to really kind of know what you're getting out of this Florida State team. And it's strange because that's what we did, Thursday, Friday, the Alabama game. You just kind of reached that point of, can we just play this already? Can we just see this already? Can we just see James Blackman already? Can we just see if that offensive line is going to hold up week after week already, or if it was just a momentum thing? Can we see just how good that defense is and how it can keep them in games? Can we just see what Florida State looks like at home against an opponent that they're a double-digit favorite over, which, by the way, in case you haven't seen, Florida State did open as a 12-point favorite over the North Carolina State Wolfpack over the weekend, but we'll get into all that in a little bit later. But first of all, thanks so much for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, or maybe it's one of the apps you're listening on. The TuneIn Radio app, our own WTSM app. Our own WTSM app is great, gives you great access to our show and the rest of the fine shows on the Sports Monster. Of course, ESPNTallahassee.com as well is where you can stream online. Podcast, iTunes, Podcast Republic, WarChantRadio.com, the TuneIn Radio. Excuse me. Yeah, you can't get the podcast. Can you still get the podcast on TuneIn? We should find that out. WarChantRadio.com, YouTube, so many different places. We thank you so much for listening, however it is, wherever it is. Of course, you don't just have to listen to the show. You can talk back to the show. Radio at warchant.com. We actually got a Renegade Express question that I kind of wanted to do as a standalone today because I think it's an interesting enough conversation. And on top of all that, of course, at Wake Up War Chant's the Twitter account, if you like using 140 characters or less. So as I said, it's just kind of a strange day in that we didn't get a chance to talk to players yesterday. There was a little bit of miscommunication there, so we didn't get a chance to chat with them. We are going to get a chance to chat with them today, so you're going to be able to hang on for that. So, like I said, you're going to hear from Jimbo Fisher in a second. We're going to touch on a lot of Florida State topics here in just a second. But to open the show, I thought it would be a little interesting in that we talked about it yesterday. There are a lot of teams that by the end of this weekend will be a third of the way through their season. We'll have played 4 games. We'll have it under their belt. We have a good idea how most of college football is going to shake out. But I think it's interesting that we really don't know much about this Florida State team in terms of its actual postseason implications and just how effective it'll be in that front. There are some constants that we absolutely know. We know that that defense is legit. We know that Derwin James is a superstar. We know that they're deep at just about every position on that other side of the field. And even then, the places where they're not deep, you feel good about that linebacker position if you're FSU because, let's face it, Matthew Thomas played, practiced 2 days for the Alabama Crimson Tide and flew around in the backfield of the number 1 team in the nation. Jimbo Fisher, we actually didn't pull this clip for next segment, but I did think it was fascinating just how happy and pleased Jimbo Fisher was with Matthew Thomas throughout this time in practice. And how could you not be? I mean, could you imagine the performance that it takes, the athleticism it takes to practice 2 days for Alabama and then put together the game that he did. And I think you see that's why it's so important he be on the field. That's why throughout all his issues in fall camp, Florida State was willing to work with him. And it's because that's a guy you need. You desperately, desperately need, because he's a game changer. And I'm interested to see offensively, because we know who they are on that side of the football. We know it's Derwin. We know it's Matthew Thomas. We know it's Derek Nottie. We know it's Josh Sweat. Heck, we know it's just about everybody on that defensive line. But offensively, especially now that you've got a new quarterback that you've got to break in and help bring along, by the end of the season, Drew, who are the game changers for this offense? Is it Auden Tate, who looked really good against Alabama? Does Cam Akers take that step forward to take that running back job by the end of the year? I'm curious, who do you think game changers on offense?
Well, one, you already mentioned him. Cam Akers is going to be a guy near the end of the year that this offense is going to have to lean on. I firmly believe that because, listen, at the end of the day, as good of a back as Jacquez is, and as much as I like him, and I still think he's going to have a good year, Cam Akers is that game changer, that game breaker, the one who can change the scoreboard quickly. And I think even, when you look at these several weeks off, who does that benefit the most? I think you would say it benefits the freshmen quite a bit because they just get several more weeks in that playbook and several more weeks of practice. And you also look at, the oversimplification of the playbook that's going to come with that. And you wonder how much that will help true freshmen get on the field on the offensive side of the ball. I think it benefits Cam Akers. I think Cam Akers is a guy. And then I think it's going to be one of either Keith Gavin, Nooney, or Auden Tate. Maybe a guy like DJ Matthews down the stretch, but I'm not going to say that two true freshmen will be guys who are game breakers. So I'll say, whoever out of those three that Blackman would like to latch onto. And another thing that we always overlook it. We don't talk about it enough. Ryan Izzo has gotten so much better and does all the little things right, and then if you get Maven Saunders in there too, having a 2 tight end set I think will really help out James Blackman. So those are just a few of the things that I think would really help him. I really do think though that Blackman will benefit obviously from having so many elite playmakers around him, and I think that's what he's going to have to lean on, not necessarily the arm and play of James Blackman himself.
I'm with you there in that, Cam Akers is an obvious choice. Just getting one of those wide receivers and getting chemistry with that, because let's face it, that was a big deal that we came in talking about this season is why is it so great to have a quarterback coming into his second year? Because you can finally get chemistry with your wide receivers, and you feel like you finally got a wide receiver core for the first time probably since 2013, where you feel like everyone that's lined up on the field brings something different at the table, and they're more than likely better than the guy on the other end at it. You lose that when you lose DeAndre Francois because you lose that chemistry. You don't lose the talent at wide receiver. You don't lose what they can do, but you have a new guy who's once again got to build chemistry with a wide receiver core. And since 2014, you've had to have a new guy do that every single year. So I think it's very imperative that they build that relationship early, that they get that chemistry early. And I understand, listen, you've only got 3 weeks to Miami, your first real test in this season. And even then, NC State's a solid team. Going on the road at Wake Forest, which, by the way, was announced yesterday as a 3:30 kick, that's a solid team. You've only got so much time to get this together and get this going. And that's why I think the real game changer of this season on offense can be this offensive line. The more time you give James Blackman to throw, the more confidence you can build from a true freshman who's just coming in to learn this Jimbo Fisher offense, which people say is one of the most complicated in college football. The more Alec Eberle and Derek Kelly and Landon Dickerson and guys like that can give him time, if he ends up being the confident quarterback that Florida State needs him to be to still make a push at the ACC and still make a push at the playoffs, Drew, I think the offensive line has to be the biggest reason why. If at the end of the day we're looking at that and we're saying, wow, we can't believe Florida State did X, Y, or Z.
Not only for James Blackman's ability to be able to have time to throw the ball, but to run the football as well. I really think that this team is going to lean heavily, not heavily, I would say 60-40, maybe 70-30 on the run going forward, especially especially in James Blackman's first few starts. I just don't expect him to go out there throwing the ball 30 times a game. I don't think any of us should. And I think you're right that the offensive line could play a big part in that, and we'll see. That's what we're talking about, though. It's so interesting, and I can't wait to see what Jimbo's exact plan is for James Blackman, not only just in his first career start, but after having 2 to 3 weeks to kind of recalibrate and figure things out a little bit. What is it going to look like? I think you'll have a little bit better of an idea had he have been thrown into the fire 1 week after and say he went out and threw for 300 yards against ULM and gassed everyone up, and maybe it would have got people's hopes and expectations up a little too high. I think this NC State game is a good in between. Like I said, you got a couple weeks of practice under his belt, so I think you're going to get a pretty good taste of what the offensive play call is going to be for at least the near future.
Offensively, I think I'm more interested to see how does Jimbo Fisher call a game against Miami compared to NC State and Wake Forest? How does he call a game against Louisville compared to Duke? Clemson compared to Syracuse? Just how many wrinkles does James Blackman know to where those big games come around, Florida State can roll those? Because we all know that's what Jimbo Fisher does. Those big games, that playbook always gets dug in a little deeper, some different wrinkles to throw elite defenses off guard. I'm interested to see just how much James Blackman knows, to see how much of that we see.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things maybe where he'll lean on one of his more veteran guys to maybe throw in a little trick play or something like that. That's a good. How much is he going to trust James Blackman to make a play that he's not necessarily comfortable with making, or is he comfortable with giving it to him? But the thing about Jimbo that you can feel confident in as a Florida State fan is he's always done that really well. He never gives a young guy too much that he can handle. He's always done that well. You saw it with Christian Ponder. You saw it with E.J. Manuel. He's done it time and time again. So whatever he gives James Blackman, I have full confidence that he thinks at least that James Blackman can handle it. So, yeah, we'll see how he calls the different games. I really don't expect there to be a huge difference just because I think we've talked about it so many times. That playbook has gotten so much smaller. And maybe as you get deeper into the year, Blackman feels more comfortable, kind of like Francois did. But Francois still had that redshirt season under his belt, and you saw how long it took him to kind of start to get it together. So I just don't want to expect too much from James Blackman, and I don't want to expect the playbook to be anything like it was really with DeAndre Francois.
Let's just play this game already, please. Can we please just get there? I'm sick of talking about this one. It's just time to hit the books. It's time to play this game. Noon, Doak Campbell Stadium. Let's see what the kid can do. Let's let it rip. Have some fun. But first of all, let's get you caught up, ladies and gentlemen. World of football and baseball last night. This is why you were sleeping.
Hello. Good morning. Wake up. Wake up. Wake me up. Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
Monday night football last night. Boy, the Giants stink. They are really bad. Really. Like, how did the Giants literally go from being what seemed like the only competent organization in the NFC East to arguably the worst team in the East? Would you make that argument that New York's the worst team in the East?
Yeah, they really might be. They looked, and I'll say this. I say this very, very skeptical, and they might be worse than the Jaguars. All right, I mean they look terrible. Offensively, defensive, they look miscombobulated out there, and Eli has looked awful through 2 games.
Horrendous.
So that's not a good sign. It might be a bad Eli year, which means bad Giants year.
I think we're getting to that point, though. I mean, Eli Manning is not getting any younger. Eli Manning, as it sits right now, is 36 years old. He's only got a couple years left in it. He's not a guy who's got a ton of gas in the tank left. I mean, Peyton was, 39 when he retired? Somewhere in that ballpark? It is what it is as far as New York goes. But Ben McAdoo, that seat's got to be a little hot, right? Considering the Giants have been, I'm not telling you the best team in the league over the last decade, but if Tom Coughlin made him one thing, it was definitely the model of consistency.
Right, and you also think about just being in a city like New York. It's not a patient organization. So he's going to have to get things rolling here shortly, or he's going to be in trouble. Say you start 0-4, 0-5. Yeah, things are going to heat up for him quite a bit.
24-10, of course, that final score last night in New York. Detroit getting that W. I thought the Lions would look a little better against that Giants team, however, too. They're not completely free from blame. Meanwhile, Major League Baseball, here's your scores. It's Milwaukee 3, Pittsburgh nothing. Philadelphia wins at home over the Dodgers 4-3. Final 11 innings at Camden Yards. It's Boston 10, Baltimore 8. New York Yankees defeat the Minnesota Twins 2-1 yesterday. Oakland Athletics defeat Buck Farmer and the Detroit Tigers yesterday in Comerica 8-3. It's the Fish all over the Mets 13-1 at Marlins Park. The Padres get themselves a win 4-2 over the Arizona Diamondbacks. Meanwhile, if you look at the playoff picture in the moment, well, we have a pretty interesting game going on right now. Your series to start the playoffs right now. The American League, Houston would play Boston. Boston, by the way, leads that series 2-1. Meanwhile, the wild card game, Minnesota versus the Yankees. I'd be willing to watch that game. Minnesota has been, listen, as a Tigers fan, I'm not thrilled by it, but it's been interesting to see that we're here mid-September. The Twins still have a shot at the playoffs. What?
And the Twins were the team that got off to the super hot start. Nobody took it seriously because it's the Twins, and they kind of do that sometimes from year to year. So you just kind of wait for them to fall apart, and they really didn't. So,
well, they didn't necessarily sustain what happened out of the gate, but at the same time, the fact that nobody because usually what happens is someone in the Central just comes up and buries them. And by someone, I mean about two people, and it knocked them out of the equation. It didn't happen for Detroit this year. The White Sox are a mess. I mean, they just kind of stayed there. Nobody really came in, smacked them down a peg outside of the Indians, and I don't think anybody saw that Indians run coming. Anyway, Minnesota and New York will earn the right to probably get buzzsawed by it. Meanwhile, in the National League, that Colorado and Arizona would be your wild card game at the moment. Winner that would play the ice-cold Dodgers. Meanwhile, the other series, inject this into my veins. The Cubbies and the Nats. Yes, give me that. Give me 5 games of that. I am so on board for that. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to hear from head coach Jimbo Fisher. Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. So as I said, Jimbo Fisher addressed the media yesterday. A little bit of a shorter press conference than usual because, like we said at the top of the show, honestly, until you see something, there's not really much you can say. Until you play a second game, there's not many conclusions that you can draw. But I figured today would be a good day to maybe look down, play some of this back, and maybe think to yourself, what can we learn from what Jimbo Fisher said yesterday? It's a segment that, as you may know, we call Duly Quoted.
Quote mode.
We have ways of making talk.
You talking to me?
Okay, I'll stop.
You know I talk too much.
End quote mode.
All right, so Jimbo Fisher talked about a variety of topics yesterday. We'll break them down one by one, go a little bit down the line. And first of all, he's talking a little bit about his opponent on Saturday, the North Carolina State Wolfpack. Here's what he had to say in his opening comments.
What do you kind of remember about just the way they do things, and what improvements have you seen from NC State from last year to this year?
They did a great job of keeping the ball. They converted on third downs, made some plays, won the field position battle. We started most drives backed up, so we had long fields to go most of the game, almost every drive. We had big drives when we had it, didn't have it as much. Defense really played well the second half. They got us the first half a little bit, and then we had some big drives in the second half. We had a big critical drive to get out and win the game, but they played the run real well.
And, they did play the run real well. They ran the ball effectively. They sustained drives, like Jimbo Fisher said. They were able to keep the ball out of Florida State's hands. And I'll say this, that's one of the things that kind of worries you about this game when you're breaking in a new quarterback. Maybe not as much as it did last year, because NC State's not nearly as good as running the ball as they were last year. Ryan Finley's a great quarterback, But right now, they really don't have any answers back there in that backfield when it comes to the ground game. But that would worry me a lot. If Florida State was going up against last year's NC State team, if you've got a new quarterback and you have no idea what to expect of your offense, and NC State can routinely 3 yards in a cloud of dust you, I don't care how good your defense is. They're going to get tired. And that's why I'm not quite as worried about this game as I would be, say, a year ago. Because until they find answers on the ground, that offense is not going to be as consistent as it's been for Dave Dorn over the last year or so.
Right, and the less opportunities that James Blackman gets, the worst off your football team probably is going to be, because you do need some time for it to break him in and you know, have him get comfortable back there, and especially if your offense and you're worried about the efficiency of it, the more opportunities you get, obviously the better. So if he's back there only getting a couple of drives in a football game because NC State was somehow able to keep the ball away from you all game, and they're giving the ball back to him kind of in high pressure situations where you need to go down and score to win the football game and things like that, that's probably about worst case scenario. But, you know, not the same NC State team, not at NC State. The game doesn't scare you as much as it would have a year ago, say, if this exact situation had happened.
NC State is 75th in the country in rushing yards, which isn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be when I dug through it. But, yeah, they've just still got a couple kinks that they got to work out there. And I think if you could get 3 and outs, if you can force them to be one-dimensional like you think you can, and again, that's nothing against Ryan Finley. I think Ryan Finley's a good quarterback. But if you can get them to be one-dimensional, force yourself off the field with a good defense, it's the more time you can work with a new quarterback, and it's the more time that you can try to get yourself in a groove on offense. Speaking of getting in a groove, practice is always such an important thing with Florida State, and Jimbo Fisher's such a praiser of the process and the routine. He got asked about the practices that his team may or may not have missed, and here's what he had to say about it.
No, we're down. We're probably down a couple with them, but we got 4 in last. We got 3 good ones last week. A shortened one Thursday, and then even a shortened Thursday on Friday because we came back at noon just to get trying to simulate getting up and having a pregame meal at 8 o'clock and playing at noon and doing all those things. Try to get them as ready as we could there, but probably down a 1 or 2 overall. But we're in good shape. I mean, from playing a number of games we played.
You heard it right there. Jimbo Fisher's trying desperately to get his guys ready to a kickoff time, trying to get it started for a date and Jimbo Fisher will touch on this in a second, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but the idea that how strange it must be for these guys who've grown up in football and even these coaches who, you know, mid-September, they should be playing football games. You've spent a half a month on the sidelines, and you've just kind of been practicing and keeping those guys focused. And I know that they were a very focused bunch in fall camp. The coaching staff really liked what they saw to there. But that's one thing about a second camp. How long can you keep your team's attention?
Well, you talk about, too, how many times have you seen a good football team come out and sleepwalk through the first half of a noon kickoff? So that's another thing you have to keep in mind. And I think it's good that they're simulating, you know, waking up and getting ready for a noon kickoff, because, you know, you wouldn't think that it's going to be an issue with these guys not having played in several weeks and being super excited to get back out there. But at the same time, it really could be. You can't leave a page unturned there, especially when you have a true freshman quarterback. So I think it's good that they're going through that routine and getting used to it. And, you know, we'll just see, but you really got to feel like hopefully this team is revved up and ready to go for this football game.
Florida State's got one of the deepest running back cores in the country, but there were some folks who were maybe a little curious about why Jimbo Fisher handled them the way they did against the Alabama Crimson Tide. He got asked about the depth chart for running backs right now, and here's what he had to say.
Jimbo, after having the first game and then the last couple of weeks of practice, how is the running back rotation looking, and has anybody started to shake out at all?
Well, we've played one game, and those guys are all in the same rotation they've been in. Getting better, a lot less mistakes, little things for those younger guys keep getting better and better. So we're exactly where we're at.
It's a fair enough question for Myra, but I also think it's a fair enough answer and the right answer from Jimbo Fisher, in that, once again, we can speculate all we want, but at the end of the day, sure, we're a month into the season. Florida State's played a game. And was Jimbo Fisher right maybe for using the slower, more power back against Alabama and that quick defense? I don't think so. That is one thing that I think Coach Fisher maybe should have relied a little bit more on his freshmen. And I know that's difficult, especially in that second half. I'm not going to hold it against him because they got behind the 8 ball and they had to do things to make it work. But I think it's the right answer in that, listen, we only know so much about this team. That coaching staff only knows so much about this game just because of what a weird first month we've had.
Right, but also, how much did Cam Akers really feel comfortable in that offense already? How much did he know that did not know that Jaquez Patrick knew out there as far as pass pro and things like that? I tend to agree, obviously, that Akers is the more talented back. I think we all think that and know that. However, you kind of saw the same thing with Dalvin Cook in his freshman year, where it was a guy like Carlos Williams who maybe, a little bit more talented than Jaquez, but at the same time, you sat there and you saw the flashes from Dalvin and you wondered and kept wondering, why isn't this guy getting more touches? And I think it's more of just a level of trust. And can I put him out there on downs other than when I just want to give him the football? And so I think that's what you'll see as the year continues to go. And that's why I brought up the fact that these extra weeks of practice might be big for, Cam Akers' workload getting a little bit larger.
You think we see Cam Akers in a form of Wildcat this year?
Maybe. That's so hard. Just because typically you don't see it. But he's a guy that, played high school quarterback and did it pretty well. So I think that really kind of all comes down to the fact of how much is your offense struggling? Does it need an extra spark at times? How much do you trust Cam to do that? But, I'll go ahead and say that at some point this year, you will see a package where something like that comes into play.
Over under 5 snaps in a wild Cam formation.
For the year?
For the year.
I will say under that.
Okay. Because here's my thought on that. My thought on that is, how comfortable is James Blackman with the playbook? Not necessarily how good is the offense, but we talked about it in the last segment. Miami, Louisville, Clemson, Florida. Big games, Jimbo Fisher likes to provide wrinkles in his offense. And if he doesn't feel like his quarterback's comfortable enough to dive deep and provide those wrinkles, why can't a Wildcat be that? Why can't a guy who – and it's not like Cam Akers is just a running back. You said it. He was a good high school quarterback. He actually has an arm. That's the problem with Wildcat situations so much is you put that running back or that wide receiver in a quarterback, and none of them know how to throw the ball. None of them throw a pretty ball. If Cam Akers can come in and he can throw a pretty ball and you have to respect different things in that formation, then you have something a little formidable. Anyway, Jimbo Fisher was also asked, I like this one from Corey Clark. He was asked, what'd you do last weekend? Here's what he had to say.
Jimbo, what'd you do the last 2 Saturdays? Did you get to watch any games?
I didn't watch many. I was with my kids. Took Ethan fishing on Saturday, spent time with him all day, went on a little boat, and a little John boat, and spent out there all day in the sun and let him fish. I don't get to be with them. Spent time, watched Trey Friday night, and then spent time with him watching his game film on Saturday. He wanted to show me, and then took Ethan fishing and got a little bit of game in on Saturday. That was it, not much at all. Spent most of the time with my family.
I mean, this is the first time in, maybe in your middle school that you haven't had consecutive Saturdays when you were playing football. Did you get antsy?
Yeah, last week was a little different because of the hurricane. The week before, we were getting ready home. You were just getting ready for the hurricane. That was just crazy, working around the house, making sure everything was secured up. This week was like that, and I just spent time with my kids. I'd rather do that than anything in the world.
It's fascinating. I think Corey hit it on the head. You look at some of these folks in this coaching staff, and they've been coaching or playing football or doing that for some of them 20, 30 years for every Saturday. I can only imagine the weirdness and the nervousness and the idea that you mean I can't do this? I mean, sure, there's a lot more to the job than just coaching on Saturdays. I'm fully aware of that. You got to recruit, you got to fundraise, you got to tour, you got to shake boosters' hands, you got to do all that. But this is the nuts and bolts of why you're paid, why you do what you do. It's for these Saturdays in the fall. And that's got to be really strange when the main course of your job only happens 13 weeks out of the regular season all year out of 52 weeks. And here for 2 weeks during this time where Everybody else gets to do it. You're just kind of here twiddling your thumbs.
Right, and there's no blueprint on how to handle this situation, so that's why it'll be so interesting to see how they really went about and how this team looks after the layoff, because at the end of the day, this is just kind of a figure it out as you go type scenario. None of these guys are used to that, so we'll see how not only the coaching staff, but obviously the players have handled it, and that's why we're just all excited to see this football team play on Saturday.
Turnabout's fair play. Jimbo Fisher was also asked about how he thought the players were handling such a thing.
Coach, I mean, you said that you didn't get too antsy over these last few Saturdays. Are you getting the sense that your players are now getting antsy, just waiting for another chance to play?
I'm sure they are. I don't. Like I tell them, don't worry about those things you can't control. I'm sure, but we all are. We all want to play. It feels weird to know that other people are playing and you're not playing. There's no doubt about that. But as far as the other, hey, no sense to get upset about it. It is what it is, and you got to play what you play. And like I say, it was for a reason that was a lot bigger than football. And there's still a lot of families that are still suffering and have things going on with them that we know they're still trying to get helped out and throughout this state. And to me, that's the most important thing. Now we're back in ball. Maybe we can give some of those folks a few hours of pleasure when they get to watch us play. And sometimes that's a good relief of coming back, that normality's coming back.
It's a solid diplomatic answer, and I think normality is among the key phrase. And for the folks in Miami, whenever they get to finally play a game, I think it's a big deal more than anything else in the state. And I hate to be Captain Obvious there, but, Tallahassee got lucky. Gainesville and Jacksonville got a little bit more than they thought they would, but at the end, got pretty lucky. For a lot of those fans who are just down in South Florida, Florida State fans too, Florida fans too, the fact that you're able to get back to schedule, start playing these games, it's not just good for the players, it's not just good for the coaches. I think it's just good for the people in the state that you can kind of put everything that happened in the last weeks behind you and you can play a little bit of football. I don't think you can understate the importance of that. I mean, I get it. Florida's already played. The NFL team's already played. But the idea that everybody is back up and running again, especially, of course, a program as big as Florida State, I think it's a big deal. And finally, interesting question. Jimbo Fisher kind of got asked the question that everybody else thought maybe should be asked, elephant in the room wise. Listen, James Blackman's great. He's a tall kid. He's really skinny. And you get a little worried about a guy who's that skinny going up against some of the stoutest defenses in the country. He got asked. Here's what Jimbo had to say.
Some people might look at the roster and look at James. He's 6'5", 169. And kind of get a little fixated on that. Are you concerned in any way about James physically being able to hold up to?
He played in the highest levels of ball through high school and did well as any of the guys other. I mean, how big was Lamar Jackson when he came out? He wasn't much bigger than that. I mean, he wasn't 180, 180, can run and athletic, and they play ball in the league they play at Belgrade. Trust me, he's been hit, he's been knocked around, he's been beat up. He's a tough guy. He can play at a high level, and his size like that, sometimes guys like that, the guys you can't ever hurt. Sometimes they are. I mean, he's played at a high level. If I thought that, and I don't mean that, I wouldn't have thought he could play here. You know what I mean? And this kid can run, play, competitive, tough. I mean, you play at Belgrade and come out of that high school system, you're a competitor. You got some toughness to you.
And I think Jimbo Fisher raises a good point there. There are just some folks who, no matter how good a shape they are, tend to be more injury prone than others. And there are other guys who, no matter how big or small they tend to be, seem to fight off injury pretty well. I don't think we know that about James Blackman yet, but Jimbo Fisher had to give the answer that he had to give, and that we feel very confident. We know that he can do this. And I think they think he can. But that's kind of the answer you have to give in a situation like that. It's a fair enough question, but at the same time, what's Jimbo Fisher going to say? Yeah, I'm scared. We're actually putting him in bubble wrap under his jersey. There's nothing much for Jimbo Fisher to say, but at the same time, I get what he's trying to get at. I get what he's trying to say. He played against very high levels of competition in high school. But college is a different monster. It's a completely different animal. And that front seven at NC State is no joke whatsoever. There's more on the other side, folks. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by our friends at For the Table.
Sometimes I'm right, and I can be wrong. My own beliefs are in my song.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online.
How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in Warchant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on Warchant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
I'm sat alone in a boggy marsh, totally motionless except for
Wake Up Warchant brought to you by your friends at For the Table. Speaking of For the Table, 4 to 7 tonight. Got yourself the best happy hour in town. Go on over, have a good time. Any of those 3 different experiences over there in the heart of College Town, Madison Social, Central, and Township. And then after you're done there, why don't you head on over to the 7th Hill Tap Room. 7 o'clock tonight, we got the Man Cave Show. Jeff Cameron and Tom Lang going to be hosting that thing, holding it down. I'll be out there. I believe the boss man's going to be out there. Come on out. Have a good time. Watch us have a good time. It's just good to have one of these again. Chit-chat a little bit about football. Actual games being played on Saturday that involve Florida State. We got an interesting email from Stone, a guy who emails us a lot about the Renegade Express, gives us good questions every week, which, by the way, pretty sure we've got ourselves a Renegade Express lined up for tomorrow. So if you've got some questions, make sure you're putting those in for tomorrow's show. I'll have a post on the message boards for it as well for you Warchant users. And here's the question. I thought it was worth its own segment. Who are the top 3 coaches in the ACC, excluding Jimbo, Dabo, and Mark Richt? Thanks, guys, and go Noles, Stone. It's an interesting question. I mean, there's the consistency of Mark Richt. Dabo's the reigning national champion. Jimbo Fisher has turned Florida State into a model of consistency since 2010. And, oh, by the way, he's won a national title as well. So you have the 2 guys who've won a national championship. You have the guy who's come closest to winning a national championship. You get rid of those 3 guys. Who's the best 3 coaches in the ACC? And here's the thing. This is a lot harder question than it was, say, 3-4 years ago. Do you go with a more hot up-and-comer like Justin Fuente? Do you go with a more proven commodity like Bobby Petrino? Where do you fit folks into this list? Because here's the thing. If it comes to about the top 6 coaches beyond them, like there are some coaches like, listen, I hate to keep piling on the guy, but it is NC State week. Dave Dorn's probably a wrong answer here. Bronco Mendenhall's a really good but not great coach. He's probably a wrong answer here, at least right now, unless he turns Virginia into something that can win 9 games a year, in which case you kind of have to revisit that. But to me, there are a lot of guys here that are not wrong answers.
I think, for me, 3 guys jump off the page right away. I would go Petrino, Fuente, and honestly, maybe this is a little weird, but Paul Johnson would probably be the guy that I would throw in there, too. I would throw in Paul Johnson, or I guess you could say Fedora. I think they're kind of tick for tack, whatever. But those are kind of the 3 names. I think Fuente is a really, really good football coach. I really like him. Look what they've done with Virginia Tech, and quickly, too. 9 wins last year, I believe. They look good this year so far. Obviously, Petrino, you see what he's capable of at a school like Louisville, nonetheless. Not exactly a national power. And Paul Johnson, I mean, you know, he's a coup. He stayed around for forever. I mean, so that's kind of where I'm giving my props to him. He's just kind of stuck around, and he's taken a team like Georgia Tech, and you know, every once in a while they compete for that ACC title and whatnot, and I don't know. It's just tough.
But do you feel like Tech should be more consistently good than they are? Instead of, and I get it, he's won BCS bowl games running the stinking triple option. But I just feel like Georgia Tech is that school that, as far as Paul Johnson is concerned, and you know, I have nothing against the triple option. I don't get upset about it the way other people do. I mean, it's the triple option. It's not a gimmick offense. It's the offense that kind of helped make football work for a very long time. But I just feel like for every wow for Paul Johnson, there's a 7 and 6 that shouldn't be.
That's true. I really wonder what's the expectation for Georgia Tech football? How good are they really supposed to be? I feel like not that good. So I feel like anytime they really do anything, I also really like Dave Clawson. You see what he does at a school like Wake Forest. I mean, we talk about the Georgia Techs, the Louisvilles, whatever. Dave Clawson, time and time again, has built up a team off of 3 stars. And he said it. He's talked about it before about how they might not be ready as freshman, sophomore, but when it comes time to junior and senior, and it's ready for them to produce, he has those guys ready. And Wake doesn't exactly do a ton nationally, but they're still normally a pretty solid football team.
Well, that's the thing about Wake is that when Jim Grobe ended up parting ways with that program, you can say he was fired, you can say he chose to leave. Whatever happened there, it was always kind of stated that, well, Wake's never going to be what Wake is again. And that was an 6 to 8 win model of consistency, going to a bowl game at the smallest school in the Power 5. Heck, the smallest school in FBS. I mean, that was an enrollment that for the longest time, and may still be, under 4,000 students. The fact that he was able to make Wake decent as quick as he did, the fact that they were able to turn that around as fast as they did, because everybody just kind of thought, for about 4 years, this is going to sting. And it took about 2 seasons of bad for Wake to turn right back around and say, wow, that's a decent defense. Hey, they can kind of run the ball. Remember how bad they were running the ball when Clawson first got there and he insisted on doing it? And I think it's just because he knew he was going to take his lumps those first 2 years. So he may as well get some reps and some experience out of his backs and his line. And it paid off. I mean, Wake was patient because Wake knew it had to be patient. Wake's never going to be in win now mode. Wake's always going to be in win 8 mode. Like, if you win 8 or 9, this season is through the roof. And the guy that we haven't mentioned that's in my top 3, it's definitely Petrino. I mean, his record speaks for itself. It's definitely Clawson. Fuente's a guy who, if you ask me this in 2-3 years, may make this list. But there's a guy on this list that we have not mentioned yet. David Cutcliffe won the Coastal Division at Duke. You could say what you want about his sloppy handshakes with Jimbo and stuff like that. Duke. The only other guy who's done that, had that success at Duke, Steve Spurrier. That's a pretty good coach. It's a guy who knows what he's doing. I like Larry Fedora a lot. I think his offense is fun. I think any guy who can recruit at North Carolina the way he does certainly has something going right. But Larry's almost got a little bit of that Kevin Sumlin disease where things kind of seem to fall apart for them at the worst moment. Cut 10 games, 10 wins in 2013. Sure, they weren't the story of the ACC. It was kind of overshadowed by Florida State. But the thing is, I think as Florida State fans, this fan base, because there was so much talk in 2013, there should have been, gets caught up in that and not realize, yeah, on the other end, Duke won 10 games. We could talk about this forever, but we got to hurry up and put a bow on this right after this. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. We out, folks. Have a good one. Mike and Mike's up next, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Hey, thanks for downloading today's show. If you haven't already, why don't you rate and subscribe us? We certainly do appreciate it, and of course, we appreciate you listening anyway, so just go ahead and click that right there. You know you want to. Come on. Come on. Thanks again for letting us do the show. We love giving you all the football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, all year round. Not just football season, not just spring practice, but hopefully giving you the freshest and newest FSU content every day. Thanks, guys.